Hi, it's Darren, and in Coleman University, today we'll be talking about Bitcoin, NFTs, Ethereum, and other words you may not quite know what they mean. Stay tuned. Okay, welcome back. So we're going to be talking about Bitcoin, blockchain, and these new words we're hearing about, and wondering is there maybe a place for some of these in a prudent investment portfolio. So I am not professing to be an expert in this stuff, but I'll give you the lay of the land as I see it from the research that I've been doing. So I'll start off first by what is blockchain? You've heard that term. Well, blockchain effectively is a series it's an open ledger system. So it records all these transactions in a way that really can't be manipulated by anybody. So that's a very interesting technology, and some of the advocates say, well, this will eventually replace banks, for example, as financial intermediaries. We don't need banks if we can keep track of things through the blockchain. And the Bitcoin is a currency or a cryptocurrency that uses the blockchain to keep track of who used it, who had it, who gave it to somebody else. So the blockchain is kind of the infrastructure, and Bitcoin is one of the first examples of a currency that uses that infrastructure to keep track of everything. So that's about as far as I want to go with that. What I'm seeing is that there seems to be two big arguments as to why these currencies actually matter. And I'll focus really on Bitcoin because it's kind of the granddaddy of all these things. And so the argument, first of all, is, well, Bitcoin really can be a currency. We can use it to buy and exchange goods and services. Well, is that really going to be effective? And my answer to this so far is I can't see how it's possible. And the reason, or one of the big reasons, is energy consumption. I'm going to show you some charts and information today from a report that recently came out from Bank Credit Analyst. Now, this is one of the world's most respected research houses, and it's one that I spend quite a lot of money annually buying research from, and you won't generally see this stuff anywhere else. So the first thing I want to show you is the amount of energy it takes to process just one Bitcoin transaction. Here's the chart. As you can see, it takes 14 times the energy to do one Bitcoin transaction as it takes to do 100,000 Visa transactions. So how on earth are we ever going to use Bitcoin to buy a cup of coffee or put gas in the car or pay the hydro bill? I don't see how this is possible. And if we look at the challenge that Bitcoin provides, it seems to me like this is never going to be something that can be figured out. And the next chart I want to show you is just how much energy the Bitcoin industry uses just now annually. And we're barely using this stuff yet. And as you can see, it's astronomical. And just Bitcoin alone uses the annual electricity consumption more than countries like Hungary or New Zealand or Belgium or Greece or Venezuela or Egypt or Thailand. And very quickly, it looks like it's about to surpass the amount of energy consumption of Spain or Australia. Now, by the way, all this is doing is powering computers to solve complicated mathematical algorithms to keep the whole thing working. And the people that have these Bitcoin mining operations, they're the ones solving very complicated algorithms to keep that general ledger system going. And they're rewarded by getting fractions of a Bitcoin as payment. So this energy consumption is not used to move goods around the world. It's not used to power homes or farms. It's just to keep this whole thing kind of running. And from my perspective, this is almost unconscionable as energy usage. It's unbelievable. And so I see this as a real barrier to wider adoption, because if we're barely using Bitcoin now, and this is the amount of energy it uses, I don't know how you solve this problem. And I've talked to people in the Bitcoin industry about how they're going to deal with this. Is there enough green energy options and alternatives? Are there enough windmills and solar panels? And it's not possible. So, and I've heard we had a conference the other day with one of the largest asset managers in the world, and they were talking about Bitcoin, and their response to this was, well, society will have to decide if this is a good use of energy or not. And I struggle with how that's possibly a positive answer. So I'm a big believer in Steins Law, which says if something cannot go on forever, it will stop. So I don't know how this is going to work. So, and interestingly, the Bitcoin industry itself seems to have fought a bit of an internal civil war, and this argument over it being a currency or a medium of exchange doesn't seem to have held water. So most of the arguments have moved on to the second argument, which is it's a store of value. This is effectively like gold 2.0. And it's been interesting also, and I'll put a link up here to the video I did in lockdown a couple of summers ago, where I dove into this whole idea of gold as an inflation hedge. And unless you're a pirate, it really isn't. The math says it's not a great store of value over time. There are other alternatives that have been far more effective at that. And so, also the gold price hasn't really gone anywhere relative to the amount of money that's been printed. So traditionally, gold should have rallied like crazy in the last 18 months because of the amount of inflation that might be coming from all the money that's been printed, but it hasn't. And I suspect it's because the people that bought into the argument of gold as a store of value, they all pivoted to Bitcoin and Ether and Cardano and all these other things as a place to go. So now whether or not that holds water, hard to know. And a couple of preconditions for something to being a store of value. One of them is it has to be trusted. It has to be something where we all know what it is and we all believe in it. One of the challenges to crypto right now is that it's really the currency of the criminal. And I'll show you a chart here that Bank Credit Analyst did about the number of illicit addresses that are connected to crypto transactions. So we know, and we've had clients, unfortunately, that have been victims of cybercrime, and the payment for ransomware is all in crypto. And governments know this. And one of the arguments for crypto is that it gets around government regulation and other things. Well, but if you're using this for criminal purposes, you're inviting that exact regulation you're trying to dodge. So that's one big challenge to crypto. We've also seen the number of scams and crypto thefts that have been rising through time. So this is a very tricky area that the crypto industry needs to, in my view, address if anybody's really going to trust it, right? Security is really important if you want to have something as a store of value. The second challenge with respect to this is how volatile it is. Like, things have to have a reasonable level of, we need to know kind of what they're worth. And the bouncing around of crypto is remarkable. I'll show you a chart here of what Bitcoin's been doing in the last year or two. And there's no doubt that if you go back a few years, it's up quite a lot. The challenge is that look how fast it moves. And if you decide to engage in contracts and pay them in crypto, you might be in for some surprises. The most interesting one I've seen recently is an NFL player named Odell Beckham Jr. And in November, he gets paid a lot of money, obviously, but he decided that a portion of his salary, he wanted it paid in Bitcoin. And that $750,000 US salary, he said, no, I'll take it in Bitcoin. Well, that was in November. Just a few months later, Bitcoin went from $64,000, which was its equivalent exchange rate when he decided to take the contract, is now worth less than $34,000. So his $750,000 US contract is really today only worth about $400,000. So, whoops. Now, by the way, he's still obligated to pay the tax on the full $750,000. Now, maybe Bitcoin rallies back up and he's in the red and he's positive, or he's in the black and he's positive, but it's hard to know that. And given where he lives, his tax rate is a little over 50%. So that $750,000 contract, because he took it in Bitcoin and Bitcoin has fallen, is now worth only the equivalent after tax of about $35,000. I don't know if I would want to be paid $35,000 to be hit like that guy gets hit, but anyway, so that's one of the challenges that we see in this, is that valuation isn't stable. It's incredibly volatile. So hard to know what it's worth and hard to decide to exchange it for something. There's an argument also around scarcity, right? This is why things like gold and precious metals have the value that they have, is that they're hard to get, they're hard to find. So people say, well, there's only 21 million Bitcoins, so that means they're scarce. Governments can't print more of them as they can with dollars. And that's a fair argument. The challenge is, I would argue, there's no scarcity with respect to how many cryptocurrencies there are. There may only be 21 million Bitcoins, but there's all kinds of other currencies you can use. And at the moment, there's over 9,000 of them that have been created. And there seems to be new ones created almost every week. And some of them start out like Dogecoin with a joke that Elon Musk made that turned into people taking it seriously and starting to trade this thing. So I would argue that the scarcity component of this, it might be true on a per coin basis, like 20 million Bitcoins. But given that you can make these things over and over again, I struggle to figure out that's true. I would say that with precious metals, it's not like they're adding new things to the periodic table, right? So that one I also think is a bit of a struggle. Now I want to move on to NFTs, because this is another thing we've heard about, non-fungible tokens. So this is basically giving someone ownership of a piece of digital art or a pair of shoes or something like that. And I'm going to give you an example of an NFT that somebody spent the equivalent of 7.58 million US dollars on. You ready? Let me show you this masterpiece. Yeah, exactly. That somebody spent it on that, what? I don't understand. Now listen, I don't know about art, but that one, I struggle to figure out how that was worth $7.5 million. But someone did. Now, my argument against this one seems to be, it's not like buying the Mona Lisa or a sculpture, right? Or a pair of original Michael Jordan Nikes or something like that. Because if you have the physical asset, you can control it. You can license it if someone wants to copy it. Well, they don't have your original. When you get into these kinds of things, despite their merit as a piece of art, I don't quite understand as a business person how they have any value, because anybody can access it. It's not like you can put it on display or you can license it. Anybody can get it. And also, if you decide to click on that thing I showed you and download a copy of it, your copy is digitally indistinguishable from the original. It effectively, from a digital perspective, it is the same exactly as the original. Whereas if I have the Mona Lisa and you want a copy of it, I still have the original, you have a copy. You get into some of these NFTs and there's no difference. And given that you can't really license them or make revenue off of them, I'm not entirely sure what someone bought. And I would make this point is that just because something has a price doesn't mean it has a value. So we'll see where some of this stuff goes. I think from my perspective, this is a really interesting intellectual exercise, but at the moment, we're going to stay on the sidelines and be spectators. So if you have any questions or comments or new information you want to share with me, please do. I'm always interested. Thank you very much for watching. There's no exams on these universities. These are just designed to make all of us better investors. Thank you for your time.